5 godly women in a sense that have some semblance of ethics and morality. Moses' mother, who we later find out is Jochebed, Miriam, his sister, then Shiphrah and Puah, and then this unnamed princess from Egypt, who also has compassion on him. And she figures out, this princess figures out that Moses is a Hebrew child. Okay? All she has to do is this. She unwraps the coverings, and she sees that he's circumcised. Well, that tells you who.
That's a clue.
That's a big clue that you have a Hebrew child. Okay? And she adopts him. She adopts Moses. That's fascinating.
Well, she's in violation of her father's edict.
Right.
Yeah. So
And Pharaoh goes along with it too.
Pharaoh goes, well, we don't know what he knows. We don't know what he knows. But what's interesting is he becomes part of this family. Here's what's interesting. The instrument that God is going to use to bring the Torah to the world is Moshe. And yet, Moshe is born initially into this Egyptian family. Remember what we said? He's going to spend 40 years, his life's going to be divided into three series of 40. 40 years in Egypt, 40 years wandering the desert, and then 40 years leading the children of Israel in that same desert. Yeah.
He was raised in Pharaoh's house, but he was educated. He was taught to write.
For a few years. Yeah, for a few years he's with his mother until he's weaned.
Right.
And his mother is kind of the nurse. She's the one that's nursing him. Which tells us this. You know, those first 5 years are pivotal. Those first 5 years, what you teach a child in those first 5 years stays with them. And his mother has him, we don't know how long before he goes and is actually in the palace of Egypt. But bottom line is, it's not forever. She only has him for a small period of time, and he's able to figure out from that time period that he's still connected to the Hebrew people. So it's fascinating that but he's trained, we're told, in the ways of Egypt. He knows how to speak Egyptian. He knows how to, which by the way is going to come back when he needs to liberate the people. Right. He's going to know the protocols. He's going to know how things work. Remember what we said, everything that God does for us and through us is preparation for what he's doing later on. He's not wasting energy on us. Every event of our life, if we're willing to learn from it, will be used later on to advance the kingdom of God. It will be used. It's not wasting opportunities on us and teaching moments. All right. Now, go with me to Psalm 82. Psalm 82. We are now entering the third book of the Psalter. There are 5 books.
It's interesting too, sorry.
No, go ahead.
That Joseph was also raised, not raised, but he also was very Egyptian.
Yes.
And so that's interesting.
In fact, he married an Egyptian woman.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Has 2 children born in Egypt. So in fact, the children's names are quite interesting.
Paul was in Egypt.
Manasseh and Ephraim. I mean, he's
Passport issues.
quite fascinating what's going on there. All right. Go with me to Psalm 82. This is one of the Psalms of Asaph. As we've entered into, if you go back, the last section of Book 3 is Psalm 73. Psalm 73 begins Book 3. And it opens as a Psalm of Asaph. So Psalm 73, 74, 75, 76, 77, 78, 79, 80, 81, 82, and 83 are all Psalms of Asaph. So it was a guild within the within the time of David. It was one of the priestly guilds that would write music and that had access to the temple. Okay? Psalm 82 begins this way. And I'm going to read it a little bit, some Hebrew words, just to kind of give us a little bit of. Elohim stands in the council of the El. He judges amongst the Elohim. How long will you judge unjustly and show partiality to the wicked? Defend the poor and fatherless, do justice to the afflicted and needy, deliver the poor and needy, free them from the hand of the wicked. They do not know, nor do they understand. They walk about in darkness. All the foundations of the earth are unstable. I said, you are Elohim, all of you children of El Elyon. But you shall die like men and fall like one of the princes. Arise, Elohim, and judge the earth, for you shall inherit all nations. Okay? So let's unpack this a little bit. Those of you that have your handout with you, you can go to that if you have it. I'm going to read some of it and then we'll make commentary. Psalm 82 is a most interesting psalm for several reasons. Depending on how one interprets one Hebrew word, that is Elohim, this psalm can move in directions that are fascinating and mind-boggling all at the same time. For many years I have studied the Hebrew scripture, but until 5 years ago, this text was not on my radar. I grew up going to church and hearing the Bible taught, but the things I'm about to share were concepts that I can never remember having in the churches I attended both growing up and later as I moved into adulthood. If this material is new to you, I would encourage you to give it a chance before rejecting it because it's new to you. I want to say at the outset that I have been aided greatly in the material we are about to discuss from Dr. Michael Heiser, who graciously met with me on numerous occasions to answer questions that arose from a study of this psalm and related texts. So I encourage you, if you've never read it before, to get the book called The Unseen Realm, Recovering the Supernatural Worldview of the Bible, by Dr. Michael Heiser, called The Unseen Realm. You really should read this because I'm not saying it's necessarily an easy read, but it's a great read. You have to digest it sometimes in pieces, but it's worth the eating. All right. I mentioned earlier that this text hinges on the Hebrew word Elohim. So we need to ask the question, who or what is an Elohim? Within the Hebrew scriptures, there are 6 different categories of Elohim. First, Elohim can refer to Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh, Yahweh, the God of Israel. That happens over 2,000 times. Oftentimes when it's referring to him, often, but not always, it will say Ha-Elohim, the Elohim, to give you a little bit of headway, to know that you're dealing with the living God. 2, Elohim can reference members of the heavenly council, whether loyal or disloyal to Yahweh. And I give you references to that. 3rd, it can refer to gods of other nations. 4th, it can reference demons in the Hebrew scriptures. 5th, the word can speak of disembodied dead. And 6th, it can refer to angels. The one thing that unites all the categories is that Elohim refers to a, quote, place of residence. That is, the non-human spiritual world we generally call heaven. There are 3 texts that are often used to say that Elohim can refer to human judges, but these texts do not clearly assert that humans actually fall in the category of Elohim. And I give you the references there to those. But if you read those, it's not clear that Elohim are humans. It might seem strange to the Western mind that God would have a divine council where he and the other Elohim have discussions about the affairs of the nations, but this is exactly what the Hebrew scriptures portray. While time will not permit us to look at every instance of the divine council, I would encourage the reader to look at Job chapter 1 and 2, along with 1 Kings 22, 19 to 23, for a clear look at this phenom. I want to look at this one with you. Go with me to 1 Kings chapter 22. 1 Kings chapter 22. By the way, just so you're aware, I think most of you are, in the scrolls, we never had first and second. So it was always Samuel, Kings, Chronicles. It's only with modern translations that we split these, and we end up now with first and second Samuel by way of designation. Go to 1 Kings chapter 22. It's the last chapter in 1 Kings, and look with me at starting at verse 19. It says, Then Micaiah said, Therefore hear the word of the Lord. I saw the Lord sitting on his throne, and all the hosts of heaven standing by, on his right hand and on his left. And the Lord said, Who will persuade Ahab to go up, that he may fall at Ramoth Gilead? So one spoke in this manner, and another spoke in that manner. Very nebulous. Then a spirit, notice that, a spirit, a ruach, came forward and stood before the Lord and said, I will persuade him. The Lord said to him, In what way? So he said, I will go out and be a lying spirit in the mouth of all his prophets. And the Lord said, You shall persuade him, and also prevail. Go out and do so. Therefore, look, the Lord has put a lying spirit in the mouth of all these prophets of yours, and the Lord has declared disaster against you. So what we're allowed to see is that there is a meeting of the Elohim, those in charge of the operations of this world, who meet to decide how they will deal, in this instance, with a world leader. And they have, on occasion, these meetings. And every now and then, the Hebrew Scriptures will peel back and let us know that this group, this divine council, is having a meeting. Okay? And you can see Job chapter 1. Now, for other references, I gave you here, I give you a couple of other places here. Jeremiah, Job 15:8. And Jeremiah 23:18. Look at Job 15:8 just for a second here. I'm going to Job chapter 15. Just an interesting, you have to understand what we've just talked about in order to understand this particular text. In verse, he says in verse 15, verse 8, have you ever heard the counsel of God? It's another word for counsel, sod. Do you limit wisdom to yourself? In other words, have you been in the counsel of God? How do you know what's going on unless you've been there? Okay, so he's asking him this question. And we can see this, if we go back, for the fun of it, go back to Job chapter 1. Job chapter 1, it says, verse 6, Now there was a day when the sons of God, the Bnei Elohim, came to present themselves before the Lord, and Satan also came among them. And the Lord said to Satan, From where do you come? And you can read on Job chapter 1 and 2, there's this, again, divine council meeting. And they're deciding here what's going on with an individual named Job. They're going to talk about him. They can talk about anybody. They can talk about nations. They can talk about individuals. And they have these meetings so that they can decide how they're going to move forward with individuals, leaders, nations. It seems a little odd to us that God would have a council, but he has these other Elohim that he has placed over the nations, and they report back to him as to what's going on in these nations. And then there's a discussion, so to speak, as to how things will move forward and what they will do for us down here, to us or for us. Okay? So there's two realms that are operational at the same time. One of those realms is unseen. However, every now and then the other realm will come here and interact with us. Bless you. So, yes,
I was just curious about, or wondering, it seems like that one, Micaiah was the only one that admitted to what he saw, and I wonder if those other prophets who said, don't tell the truth, saw something too, but they were too worried about really telling. And the thing that's also weird is like, you think that those kings, I mean, do they want to just hear what they want to hear, or do they want to hear the truth, you know?
yes.
And it's just weird how they just, that poor guy, he told the truth, and then he was like, no,
But here's the thing. If you're going to be around a world leader, if he's not a good person, you're not going to be around him for very long if you're telling him what he doesn't want to hear.
but if they all would have told them what they saw, I mean, that's
Right.
if they're all prophets, wouldn't they have all seen that stuff? I mean,
Yes, potentially.
you know?
But megalomaniacs don't want to have anybody around them who'll tell them differently. You know, it's like, that's a good way to get your head, you know, get banished and be done with, because, you know, tell me what I want to hear.
But it's weird because now that was a bad decision because they were off.
Right. Yes.
This is why that our battle is not a battle of flesh and blood.
Absolutely.
It's a battle against spiritual.
Absolutely.
Dark powers.
Right.
And I see also a parallelism between Job and Peter. Yeshua said that Satan seeks to sift you out, Peter, like Job,
Right.
but Yeshua withheld him.
Yes. Yeah.
And there we see the counsel, if you want to call it this, like many times in Paul's writings, we see, Paul says that Satan is the god of this world. And he had the power in the temptation of Christ, he had the power to give you